listening to the Sermon Podcast of Brockport First Baptist. We are a progressive American Baptist congregation located about 20 minutes outside of Rochester, New York. To learn more about our church and support our ministries, please visit brockportfirstbaptist.org.
So, prove me wrong, Pastor Dan. Every time it's Communion Sunday, he always throws me verses that have a lot of difficult pronunciations. Knowing that my high school Latin teacher is in the congregation. So today's reading is Acts 20, 1 through 12. In your pew Bibles, it's on pages 904 through 905. Feedback.
Turn down, I think it's 4 or 5. Yeah.
After the uproar, is it on? Okay. After the uproar had ceased, Paul sent for the disciples, and after encouraging them and saying farewell, he left for Macedonia. When he had gone through those regions and had given them much encouragement, he came to Greece, where he stayed for 3 months. He was about to set sail for Syria when a plot was made against him by the Jews, so he decided to return through Macedonia. He was accompanied by Sopater, son of Pyrrhus, from Berea, by Aristarchus and Secundus from Thessalonica, by Gaius from Derbe, and by Timothy, as well as Tychicus and Trophimus from Asia. They went ahead and were waiting for us in Asia. They went ahead and were waiting for us in Troas, but we sailed from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, and in 5 days we joined them in Troas, where we stayed for 7 days. On the first day of the week, when we met to break bread, Paul was holding a discussion with them, since he intended to leave the next day. He continued speaking until midnight. There were many lamps in the room upstairs where we were meeting. A young man named Eutychus, who was sitting in the window, began to sink off into a deep sleep while Paul talked still longer. Overcome by sleep, he fell to the ground 3 floors below and was picked up dead. But Paul went down and, bending over him, took him in his arms and said, "Do not be alarmed, for his life is in him." Then Paul went upstairs, and after he had broken bread and eaten, he continued to converse with them until dawn. Then he left. Meanwhile, they had taken the boy away alive and were greatly comforted. The word of God for the people of God.
You know, Julie, I give you these passages because you do such a good job with the pronunciation. That was awesome. That was awesome. We are continuing today with our study of Acts. We're jumping ahead a little bit to Acts chapter 20 because as dark as this story is, I feel like it's an oddly good story for back to school. Don't worry, though. We are going to go back. If you care about this sort of thing, we're going to go back and cover everything we skipped in chapters 18 and 19. We'll get there eventually. For today, though, I want to talk to you about this weird little story about a kid named Eutychus. Is that too dark of an image? I was debating. I think I asked 3 people this week, is this a messed up thing to put on the bulletin? But that's the story. We'll get into it. So the Apostle Paul is in a city called Troas. He gathers with the local church there for dinner, and he starts preaching. But Paul's sermon goes a little long. In fact, it stretches through the night and into the next morning. So I don't want to hear any of you complain about sermon lengths ever again. Round about midnight, a young man named Eutychus, who's sitting in an open window, bad place to sit, by the way, Eutychus gets drowsy and he falls asleep. And then he literally falls out the window 3 stories to his death. Everyone rushes outside, including Paul, who seems way too calm in this situation. I don't know if this is a common occurrence when Paul preaches. But Paul tells everyone, don't worry, his life is still in him. He goes back upstairs, continues the sermon, and then this young man comes back to life to the great relief of everyone present. Weird story, right? I got my start in ministry 20 years ago now, as a volunteer youth leader. When I was in college, I started serving with the youth group at my church. And I remember in those early days of ministry, I went to this big convention for youth leaders. It was this huge event with workshops and speakers. There was a house band. And I remember one night of this conference, the keynote speaker was an older African-American pastor who preached a heck of a sermon. He had that stereotypical black preacher voice. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? I can't imitate it because I don't want to get canceled. But he preached a fantastic sermon, and it was on this passage. It stuck with me all this time. And as he preached, as he talked about the story of Eutychus, there was this line he kept returning to, almost like a cadence. Why was that young man sitting in the window? He would say it over and over again. Why was that young man sitting in the window? Why was that young man sitting in the window? It was amazing. Because, see, there's a subtext to this story that's really easy to miss. At that time, in that culture, where you sat in a room said everything about your standing in the community. The seats in the front, those were reserved for the VIPs. Right? The church elders, the leaders, honored guests, they sat in the best seats up front so that they could hear everything, so that they could ask questions, interact with the speaker. That's where the important people sat. The middle of the room, where the bulk of people sat, this is where just like pretty much your average anybody's could sit. You know, it'd probably be really crowded. It'd be a much smaller room than this. You'd be huddled together, really quietly leaning in to listen because, right, there's no microphones at this time. But then, in the back of the room and around the edges of the room, this is where your outsiders sat. The less well-regarded members of the community. At the time, that would have included women. That would have included servants, slaves, newcomers, anyone who maybe didn't want to be seen at a Christian gathering. And that also would have included children. Our Bibles call Eutychus a young man. That's the language that it uses. But the original term being used in the Greek is a little bit more vague than that. It could mean a young adult. Could be like a teenager or a youth. It could also mean a boy. So basically anyone between the age of like maybe 10 and 25. That's Eutychus. That's his age range. This young man, Eutychus, this boy, is in the back of the room, sitting on a window. He doesn't even have a proper seat with the adults. He's in the window, nobody watching him, nobody engaging with him, nobody paying any attention to him until he falls. Why was that young man sitting in the window? Why wasn't anybody looking out for Eutychus? I would argue that the church is full of kids just like Eutychus. We have a lot of children, youth, young adults who are part of our communities. They're part of our churches. Maybe they grew up in church, they were baptized in church. They maybe have like a parent or a grandparent who still goes to church, but they're sitting in the window. And they're teetering. They've been pushed aside, paid no attention to. They go unnoticed until one of them falls. One of the most important tasks we have as a church, as a community of faith, is to walk alongside our families and assist them in raising their children in the faith. To help our kids meet and fall in love with Jesus. That's the most important thing we do as a church. And it probably comes as no surprise to hear that statistically speaking, family involvement in churches has fallen off a cliff over the last 30 years. If you ever see like a graph on this sort of thing, it's like a hockey stick, just like plummets starting around 1990 something. Most kids today are not being raised in church. Gen Z is the first generation in history where a majority of the kids, a majority of the people are being raised without religion, without like a spiritual foundation. And there are a lot of different factors behind the decline of families in the church. There's a lot of stuff that we could point the finger at and blame. We could point the finger at sports leagues for having games on Sundays. That's a popular one. I hear that all the time. We could blame parents for not making church a priority. We could talk about all the church scandals and abuse, the bigger factors driving the decline of organized religion kind of more broadly. But I really believe that if our churches were a friendlier place for families, if parents and kids felt supported and prioritized by most churches, they would be here. Imagine what it would be like to see a church like ours flooded with families. To have so many kids in this church, the balcony couldn't even hold them all. What would it take to make that vision a reality? What would we shift? What would we change? What radical steps would we take to rethink what we do as a church to reach families in our community on that level? I want to outline briefly, because I promised the parents a shorter sermon today, I want to outline some of what I'd really like to see our church do in the coming years to tackle this and to make this vision a reality. And I'm going to break this down into 3 levels. I want to talk about what church leaders can do, what I'm going to do, and what our fellow church leaders, my fellow church leaders can do. But talk about what parents can do, and what everyone can do, what all of us can do to move toward this vision and to bring families to the center and hopefully keep kids like Eutychus from falling out the window. Does this make sense? All right, let's dive into it. Let's start with me. What can our leaders do differently to make this vision a reality? In short, we've got to prioritize kids. We have to prioritize families in our planning, our vision casting, our allocation of funds and resources, all the board meetings and things like that. We've got to keep families in focus. We got to prioritize family in our worship time. We need to be talking about families and how we can support them in everything we do. I'm happy to say that we've made some great progress toward this goal in recent years. Our family ministry is growing. As James mentioned, we had 11 middle school and high school kids in my backyard last Sunday for the youth cookout. It was awesome. It was a lot, but it was a blast. We had a really good time. And we've got some amazing plans for the younger kids for elementary this year in Children's Church. We have a fantastic new curriculum we're using with the elementary kids on Sunday mornings, and it's called Spark, and it is wonderful. It is a Jesus-centered curriculum that really brings the stories of the Bible to life in a way that is fun and relatable for the kids. It does all that without watering them down, too, which I love. It isn't shame-based. Children's Church is going to be off the hook this year, you guys. It's going to be really good. For my part, I'm going to work really hard on these first Sundays of the month when we keep the kids in service to make these services more kid-friendly. You're going to hear songs that the kids know from Children's Church. I am a CHRISTIAN, things like that. My hands are really going to hurt after I'm playing that one on the drum. We're going to look for families who can serve as greeters and try to give parents and kids a more active role in the service. And I'm going to try really hard on these first Sundays of the month to make my sermons shorter. Woohoo! There you go. There it is. Woohoo! And I welcome your suggestions for other ways that we can make our church services more kid-friendly and more inclusive. Another thing we're going to try to do this year is create more opportunities for intergenerational ministry. This is something I want to be encouraging all of us to think about, especially as you are involved in ministries in our church that maybe aren't intergenerational yet. What would it look like to create more opportunities for adults and kids to be in the same place together, to be serving together, to be learning together, to be connecting, to be doing church together? That's what I want our church leadership to be thinking about this year. As for parents, there's a lot of stuff parents can do. The first and most basic is to bring your kids to church. That's the easy one. Make church a priority for your family. Make sure your kids are here for children's church. Bring kids to potlucks, youth groups, special events. Help your kids get connected here. Worship with your kids. This is a big one. We keep the kids in the church service every first Sunday of the month because there is value in intergenerational worship. There is value in kids getting to worship alongside adults and vice versa. In kids getting to see adults, getting to see their parents worship and praise God, and for adults to see kids doing the same. Huge value in that. Earlier this summer, I read a book called The Spiritual Child by Lisa Miller. Has anyone ever heard of this book, The Spiritual Child? We got a picture of it on the slides, I think. There we go. Has anyone seen or heard of this book? It's a great book, you guys. Lisa Miller is a child psychologist, not a Christian, by the way. But in this book, she breaks down the research, the science in recent years on childhood spirituality and the impact that being part of a worshiping community has on kids. Kids raised in religious settings, and this goes for churches, mosques, synagogues, temples. The particular religious brand doesn't seem to make much difference in the data, but kids raised in healthy spiritual environments are 40% less likely to use drugs and alcohol. They're 60% less likely to suffer depression in their teen years. They're 80% less likely to engage in unprotected sex and a number of other risky behaviors. Religious involvement is also correlated to an increased sense of meaning, purpose, and belonging, higher academic achievement, healthier, longer-lasting marriages, and this is for the kids when they grow up, and higher earning potential over a lifetime. Basically, anything as a parent, practically, that you want for your kids, being part of a healthy, worshiping community increases the odds of the good stuff and lowers the odds of the bad stuff. There is no drug, no club, no intervention on the planet more strongly correlated to positive life outcomes in kids than being part of a healthy church, temple, synagogue. And that's really not that surprising, because life is hard. Our kids are going to struggle. There's all the challenges of youth and childhood, all the stuff that we normally think about, fitting in, bullying, isolation, loneliness, body image, academic stress. Our kids are going to experience all of that. Our kids are going to get their hearts broken. They're going to get beat up by life. Someday they're going to grow up and deal with mortgages and financial stress, job stress, relational issues, health diagnoses. I want my kids to navigate life knowing that there is a God out there who loves them, no matter what. That God is with them through everything. I want my kids grounded in a healthy spirituality that they're not going to have to unlearn as adults through thousands of dollars worth of therapy. I want my kids to be grounded in a community of Christians who are going to pour into their lives and shepherd them in the way of Jesus. These are things, by the way, that our church is very well suited to provide. So bring your kids to church, worship with them, utilize the resources we have for your family, and let us know what we can be doing better. We've got an insert in the bulletin this week, and I don't have my bulletin with me, but it's bright pink. You can't miss it. That is a little survey for families, focusing specifically on the needs of families in our family ministry. I would love it if every family in this church filled that out in the coming weeks and dropped it in one of the joy boxes right outside the sanctuary. Let us know your needs. Let us know your ideas. Let us know what we can be doing as a congregation to better walk alongside your family. We've talked about what leaders can do. We've talked about what parents can do. Let's close with what all of us can do. What you can do, even if you don't have young kids of your own, to be supporting family ministry at our church. First and most important thing that anyone can do is pray for the kids in our church. Be in prayer for our children, our families, the youth group, all the volunteers. Pray for the kids you see running around here on a Sunday morning. Be tolerant of the children in our church. Help us make space for families. Kids are going to be loud in worship. They're going to be disruptive. They're going to run around before and after church, maybe even during church. Don't shoot them a dirty look. Don't make like a passive-aggressive comment. I wish a parent would... Don't yell at them. Don't make our parents and families feel like they don't belong. Instead, maybe offer to help. Stick around for potluck and offer to sit with a kid while their parent gets up and gets food. Better yet, introduce yourself to one of our families. Get to know them. Sit with them. Even if you're not going to stay for the meal, stay for the conversation. Make a connection. The seminary where I used to teach out in California did this massive research study about 10 years ago now called Sticky Faith, where they followed thousands of kids from across the country, church kids, and they followed them starting in early childhood into young adulthood. And they tracked dozens of factors. The goal of this study was to find out what factors make a difference in children actually staying in the faith as adults. That's what they wanted to know. Thousands and thousands of dollars, multiple years this study went on for. All that time, money, and research, they only found one thing that made a difference. One factor that impacted whether or not a kid stays in the faith as adults. How many adult Christians connected with them and invested in them as children? That was it. How many adults in their church noticed them, connected with them, mentored them, became part of their lives? The magic number, according to Sticky Faith, was 6. Kids who could name 6 adult Christians, not including their parents, who were invested in them, those kids were exponentially more likely to stay in the faith as adults. Anyone can make a connection with a kid. Anyone can have a conversation with a kid. Just try talking to Zeke sometimes. He will make it really easy. He will carry on the conversation. Anyone can walk alongside a family to help them know that they are seen, that they belong, that they are loved. You don't have to be a Sunday school teacher or a nursery school volunteer to do that. But while we're on the subject, another thing you can do, makes a huge impact, is actually volunteer and serve in our children's ministry. Most of the summer, we've been looking for a new Sunday school teacher. I'm very happy to say that we found one, which is fantastic. We had one of the kids from our youth group step up and offer to help teach Sunday school this year, which is amazing. So we've got Sunday school teachers, we've got children's church teachers. It's awesome. But we still need substitutes. I'm coming, Lori, don't worry. We need backups when our regular volunteers are sick or out of town. We need nursery helpers. Lori Way, raise your hand, Lori. Lori is looking for one person who can serve once a month in the nursery. That's the last hole we have to fill, that and backups. And next week, here at church, after worship, we have a ministry fair where there are going to be tables set up out there. There's going to be activities. There's going to be some fun things to keep the kids busy and help them interact as well. And there's going to be opportunities to sign up, to serve for small groups, classes, things like that. So plan to be here and look for a way you can plug in, especially if you can serve once a month in nursery. Yeah, Lori. Female or male, yeah, this is where the dudes in our church really need to step up. I believe there's still only one male, well, okay, not including youth group. When it comes to the kids, the little kids, there's one male person who volunteers on a monthly basis with kids. Everything else is ladies. So dudes, come on, step it up, guys. Lori. We can change volunteer to get involved, absolutely. Whatever, anything that helps. We can give $20 out. I'm game for whatever. But yeah, so be here for the ministry fair next week and look for a chance that you can plug in and help out. Help us put families first here at Brockport First Baptist so that no more kids like Eutychus fall out the windows. With that, let's pray. God, we thank you for our church family. We thank you for every single generation that calls this church home. And Lord, on this Back to School Sunday, we thank you especially for our kids, for our teenagers, for our families and volunteers. Help us to bless our families, Lord. Help us to serve them, to walk alongside them, and to empower them so that they will know that you are with them in all things. Amen.